and expert on the brain. And Russell Blaylock, MD.com is one of the websites you can visit. He's a board-certified neurosurgeon, author, and lecturer. He attended LSU School of Medicine in New Orleans and completed his general surgical internship and neurosurgical residency at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. During his residency, he ran the neurology program for 1 year and did a fellowship in neurosurgery after his residency. For the past 25-plus years, he's participated in neurosurgery in addition to having a nutritional practice. He recently retired from both practices to devote full-time to nutritional studies and research. During his residency training, he worked with the eminent neurosurgeon Dr. Ludwig Kempe. Together they developed the and it's all scientific terms, removal of intervascular tumors, which is one of the most widely used systems today. He has presented their cases utilizing the technique to the Congress of Neurological Surgeons. Look, it's a long bio, multi-pages. I'm going to stop right there. And, of course, we've had many other medical doctors and brain surgeons and endocrinologists and just on backing up what he's saying. But he has all the studies. This stuff is not secret. And we're going to be discussing it with him today. But he was very critical of the H1N1. He pointed out that it popped up in the wrong hemisphere, wrong time of year. Many other scientists, virologists said it was engineered in the lab. We know that other big companies with the bird flu killed a bunch of people. That was the London Telegraph. In fact, Google homeless die in bird flu vaccine trial. That got covered up. And then 3 months ago, we had Wolfgang Woodrig, a medical doctor from Germany, on who ran the EU 47 nation board. So I'm just prefacing this before we go to him. 47 nation board that found that the UN and others were paid off by Big Pharma to lie and create this hoax. And now we have all this mainstream news. New Canadian study suggests seasonal flu shot increased H1N1 risk. Here's another one. WHO admits that they exaggerated the dangers of H1N1, Times of India. Here's another one. Seasonal flu shot may increase H1N1. Western Australian reports of adverse reactions to seasonal flu and H1N1. Millions of H1N1 vaccine have been recalled, Washington Post. So again, Dr. Blaylock and others got attacked by the mainstream media for even questioning this. Well, here they are, vindicated yet again. So we're going to talk about the flu in hindsight and then other toxins in our food and water. Dr. Blaylock, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Alex.
Good to have you here. Well, you've got the floor. Let's talk about vaccines, mercury, the studies that you've looked at about the increases of Alzheimer's, brain damage. Explain what's really going on here.
Well, I think just a brief review of this whole fiasco of the H1N1 is very telling, and we need to remember this next year because this is going to be revisited. We're going to go through the same thing all over again. And you remember the major government organizations, CDC, the Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, National Institutes of Health, all of them were just sending the same message out that this is going to be a killer virus. It's going to target pregnant women. It's going to target young people. It's going to be the most devastating thing we've ever seen. World Health Organization, of course, started this nonsense. Yet when you actually got into the journals, the real high-tech journals that were discussing this, it didn't match what the government was saying. And we're talking about our government as well as the international body, the UN World Health Organization. What the science was actually saying is that this virus is difficult to transmit, more difficult than the seasonal flu, that it is not that pathogenic, and they didn't expect it to cause that much death. All of this science reported in the best of the science journals was ignored. Even the CDC was secretly doing studies which found that this virus was very difficult to transmit. Yet when you turned on your television, here's the news media saying, oh, this is so easy to transmit, it's just going to spread all over the world. We're expecting the ICUs, the intensive care units, to be overwhelmed. We're not going to have enough respirators for all the people that's going to need them. Young women are going to die that are pregnant in mass numbers. They were putting out figures of 90,000 expected to die, on and on and on. Yet the science the whole time was saying none of that's true. When you actually got on the CDC site, you found out, well, your whole basis for this mass vaccination and threat of forced vaccination has no foundation whatsoever from your own data. Well, it soon became obvious that the number of infections by H1N1 was nowhere near what the government was saying, and that the death rate was far less than 0.01%. So that means your chances of being seriously ill or dying from this flu was less than 99.9%. So it was less dangerous than the regular seasonal flu. And then when the actual flu came through, its first big wave, that's exactly what we saw. The death rate for the entire world was astronomically low, incredibly low. Well, then their next method of scaring the public was, oh, we're watching the Southern Hemisphere. We're expecting millions to die. Well, the flu went through the Southern Hemisphere. In both of its waves, it had one of the lowest death rates of any flu season that's ever been recorded. And that includes young children, that includes pregnant women, that includes the young, all of these so-called targeted age groups. And then I started looking at the New England Journal of Medicine, which was doing the largest studies on the flu in the Southern and Northern Hemisphere. And ironically, they left out one of the most important factors in the people that were dying. And that's that they were obese and that they were smoking. Well, they did mention the obese connection, but it was never entered the media.
Well, Doctor, most of the deaths we saw were people who were 75 years old, had double amputations from diabetes, had lung problems, and then I would see a month later that, oh, this fella in Austin really didn't die. It was a false positive H1N1. They died of complications from something else. So there was also lots of hyping people who hadn't died from it.
Well, everything they said about it ended up a lie. In other words, they were saying, well, the people were dying from bacterial pneumonia after they got the flu, and that it was pneumococcal pneumonia, and therefore they need a pneumococcal vaccine as well. Well, when you looked at the autopsy report, it said, well, most of the pneumonias were not pneumococcal, and there was no vaccine to protect anybody from it. And that, as you said, most of these people had serious illnesses, diabetes or autoimmune diseases, immune deficiency diseases, cancers. So even in the children that were dying, they were sick children. They were not normal, healthy children. But if they could find a so-called healthy person that died from it or became seriously ill, that's the one they plastered all over the news. So they would tell the public, oh, your healthy teenager is at horrendous risk. Look, here's a case. They had to search high and low to find the case. Most of the cases were from sick children.
Well, it's even worse than that.
All the sick children and sick adults, you had very few cases of anyone else dying from this flu. It was all concocted from A to Z, and this is what's so upsetting about the government. The government knew all of this. They had access to the same information I did. So they knew from the very beginning and all throughout that this was a lie. This was all nothing but a concocted epidemic to sell vaccines and to do damage to large numbers of people in this country. Now, you remember when I first talked to you about this, when all this started, I said Guillain-Barré is going to be a big danger of this vaccine, particularly in the countries where they're using the MF59 adjuvant.
Well, let me interrupt you, Doctor. I know a whole bunch of people, talk show hosts that are 42 years old, you name it, that went and got the shot, and their hands and feet are still numb, and they got Guillain-Barré, and I know people that are in the hospital dying right now. I know a whole bunch of people in Austin that took it and are in deep trouble.
Well, my point being is when they first started this, they said, oh, we're carefully tracking Guillain-Barré because of the risk factor. Have you heard any major network do a follow-up?
No.
Have you seen it in any newspaper, a follow-up of what they found? But what you're saying is exactly true, because I get emails from all over the world and all over the country of people telling me this same story. In fact, one person.
Doc, stay there. Doc, sorry to interrupt. We got a break. Come back and tell us that story on the other side. And I've got a list of questions for you. You know, what was really in the vaccine? Well, we have the insert, but you can tell us what these ingredients mean. Stay with us. Dr. Russell Blaylock. Dr. Russell Blaylock is our guest. You can find out a lot more information at his websites. We'll give you those several times before he leaves us. But while you were talking, Doctor, you were trying to finish up a story about the reports you're getting. But, I mean, I have family friends. My dad has scores of patients that he knows that have gone to the hospital. Many of them have recovered, thank God. And the doctors are even telling them, and I've seen this a few places in the news, but it's not a big news story like you were saying, that, yes, you have Guillain-Barré, and we believe the vaccine caused it. In fact, talking to Dale Dudley, who has the #1 talk show in the morning on 93.7. It's the sister station to 590, our local affiliate, the AM. I mean, he has numb fingers and numb toes, and he went to the doctor, and they said, the vaccine did this to you, but that was the seasonal shot he took. Go ahead.
Right. You know, I got an email from a man who said he felt so bad because he had encouraged his father to get the H1N1 vaccine, and he got it, and his father ended up with a severe case of Guillain-Barré, ended up on a respirator for 3 months, and had just gotten out of the hospital, and he's still severely weak. While they were in the hospital, they saw a 10-year-old child who ended up with Guillain-Barré, ended up on a respirator for over a month, and is still on the respirator. I've gotten over a list of 200 women who've lost their babies because they believed the government hype that women needed to get the H1N1 vaccine during pregnancy. And I warned people of that, that you would have a tremendous number of spontaneous abortions. And the big risk, the really big thing, is it's shown that if you overstimulate immunity during mid-pregnancy, you increase the incidence of schizophrenia and autism as much as tenfold. So we still have to wait and see what is going to be the full impact of this, because it's going to take a good 10 years before we know just how many people's babies have been ruined by this vaccine.
This isn't like that tranquilizer in the 40s and 50s where they came out deformed and you saw it right away. But again, you're a medical doctor and brain surgeon, but let's talk about why this does that to the brain. But I remember just reading in the inserts of vaccines, period, they had always said don't give them to pregnant women, and now, sickeningly, they were on the news saying pregnant women particularly need this. I mean, this is diabolical.
Well, they were doing that. At the time, there was convincing evidence from our research in neuroscience that if you stimulate the immune system of a pregnant woman midterm, in mid-pregnancy, you produce this high incidence of autism and schizophrenia. Well, I don't think I would trade having my child have autism or schizophrenia for this false idea that it was going to protect them during pregnancy, because there's no evidence the vaccine had any protection whatsoever of anybody.
But what about the autoimmune response? What about the autoimmune response? From the medical stuff I read, correct me if I'm wrong, the miscarriages, though, throughout the pregnancy, the body gets overstimulated and then sees the fetus as an outsider.
Yeah, that's part of it. It interferes during the baby's development with the placenta, so that the oxygen and blood supply to the baby is damaged, and you have a spontaneous abortion. And this was occurring in women who were almost near term. So here they were almost ready to have their baby, and they lost it. Well, if you look at the scientific literature, you're not surprised by that. But the media played a big role in getting these women to go take this ridiculous vaccine. As I say, that there's just compelling research that if you vaccinate with these powerful vaccines, because they contain aluminum or mercury, it produces abnormal development of the brain and produces long-term changes in the brain that makes that child at high risk of neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's for the rest of their life. They become hypersensitive to environmental toxins like pesticides and herbicides for the rest of their life. This has been shown repeatedly in the laboratory. Yet here we have a government policy because of payoff from big pharma, pharmaceutical companies, and government agencies that are pushing this agenda. They're totally ignoring this research, and nobody's refuted it. Nobody's come back and said, well, that's not true, because it is true. It's very well accepted in the neuroscience literature. And these are the type of things that concerns me. The other thing that concerns me about
Dr. Blaylock, got a break. Long segment coming up. It won't interrupt you for 18 minutes when we return. Dr. Russell Blaylock is our guest. The website is russellblaylockmd.com. I'm Alex Jones with Infowars.com. We're going to get into other toxins in the environment and why are they doing it. Stay with us. By the way, folks, I named a radio talk show host in Austin who took the seasonal, got Guillain-Barré for months, was getting numb all over. Thank God most of it's gone away. His toes are still numb. And the medical doctors in Austin told him it was the vaccine. Now, this is in the inserts. And they put out these fake fact sheets at the pharmacies and at the colleges and government buildings saying there's no mercury, can't cause neurological disorders. But then you get the actual insert, which we have up on screen. And we're going to be going over that with Dr. Blaylock. Now, that's what's so frustrating about this, because there were big mainstream articles I read attacking Dr. Blaylock and others when he was simply trying to save lives. I mean, he's a multi-degreed, top doctor, somebody who's researched all this. He's got all the peer-reviewed mainline studies. As he said, this is not secret. They know what they're doing, and I'll ask him why. We're going back to him here in just a moment. Before we do that, I want to encourage listeners to support this radio broadcast. That means supporting our local sponsors on AM and FM. That means spreading the word about, say, the free iPhone app, and giving us 5-star rating. Be sure and rate it when you get it. Listen to the show whenever you want, however you want. You have friends and family that have iPhones or iPads. Send them the link. It works on the iPad to our iPhone app. It has archives of the show, live stream, the restreams, the free iPhone app, big banners at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com, or you can find it on the Listen tab page. So expanding on that front. And we also have produced 2 new films that we released in April. Normally I release one film at a time, but these 2 films and their production schedule both got behind. We spent a year and a half on Invisible Empire, a year on Police State 4, The Rise of FEMA. They expose this entire agenda, why they're doing it. It wakes people up so they understand. And your purchase of the high-quality DVDs also supports this radio broadcast. So please get Invisible Empire, New Order Defined. Now shipping, now available, and Police State 4, The Rise of FEMA. Now shipping, now available, getting rave reviews. I want to thank folks out there for their support with the film. Or you can download all my films, the live TV show, the radio show, podcast, and higher quality by becoming a PrisonPlanet.tv member. It's 15 cents a day, $5.95 a month. Again, PrisonPlanet.tv. You can also call toll-free to get the books and videos and materials that we have on the website, 888-253-3139, 888-253-3139. And we've also added 4 new books to the catalog yesterday. The Secret Team by Fletcher Prouty, Jesse Ventura's Don't Start the Revolution Without Me, and several other books. And for a limited time, because when Terror Storm runs out, the price will go back up and I've got to reprint. The premiere film, Terror Storm, A History of Government-Sponsored Terror, is free with the books right now. Free. One of my top films, free. That's how important it is this film get out to everybody. So that new special is up there on the website. We couldn't do this without your financial support, so I want to thank you. Speaking of support, be sure and support Dr. Russell Blaylock. He has several websites, but what's the best website, doctor, for people to visit?
Go to www.blaylockWellnessCenter.com. BLAYLOCK wellnesscenter.com.
That's BlaylockWellnessCenter.com. Okay, so I was ranting there about the fact that they know. I mean, on the insert that really came with the H1N1 and the seasonal, it says can cause neurological disorder, Guillain-Barré, can reduce fertility, can cause cancer. And we've shown that over and over again. And I believe, and I want you to talk about this, that not only do we have a record low flu season worldwide, both seasonal and H1N1, but the Wall Street Journal had to admit a month ago, and we covered this several times here on air, if anybody wants to pull it up, that it was record low for people taking vaccines. And now Canadian studies show, they have 4 different studies, I'm sure you've seen them, but it's in mainstream news, even MSNBC, that that people that had taken the seasonal flu shot were upwards of 4 times more likely to contract and actually have a problem with the H1N1. So can you speak to that and what's in these vaccines?
Yeah, that Canadian study came out right in the middle of all of this when they were still screaming that you need to get the vaccine. The Canadian study showed that if you took the vaccine, it at least doubled your risk of contracting H1N1. An Indian study out of India found the same thing. Yet it had no impact on the U.S. policy. It did the Canadian policy. A lot of my material was going to a friend of mine in the Czech Republic, and she was translating into Czech, and it was going throughout the media. Well, interestingly, the Secretary of Health for the Czech Republic was encouraging everyone to get the vaccine and said she took it. The president of the Czech Republic said he wouldn't take it. He was scared of the vaccine. Well, guess who got the infection? The Secretary of Health. The president didn't get H1N1. They had 1 million doses of the vaccine ordered for the Czech Republic. They have 800,000 doses that are sitting. No one will take it. So the vast majority of people listened to the advice and didn't take the vaccine. Now, the thing that people need to understand about vaccines, and this is not just the H1N1, but all vaccines, the big secret in the vaccine manufacturing is that they're all contaminated. And they admit they don't know how to get contaminating viruses and mycoplasma out of these vaccines. It's impossible. Their top experts have admitted that. The other thing is almost all the vaccines are now manufactured in China. The United States FDA is not allowed to enter any plant that manufactures vaccines in China. They're allowed to come once every 12 years, and they can look at the records that the Chinese Communist officials give them, and that's how they make the determination that it's safe.
Let's say that again. The communist Chinese, who have a eugenics policy, one-child policy that meshes with the people that run our government, they're making, in some numbers I've seen, upwards of 90% of the vaccines that we take in Europe and the United States, but more so in the U.S., are being made by China. I mean, this is amazing.
Well, these are the Chinese that contaminated a cough syrup that's estimated to have killed at least 10,000 people worldwide. They contaminated baby food. They've been involved in numerous scandals of contaminating products all over the world. And yet we turn over something like vaccinations to the Chinese government, and we're not even allowed to look inside their factories. We just take these millions of doses of vaccine that come from these Chinese plants. They're not even examined once they're manufactured by the FDA. But even in the best of cases, you cannot sterilize. Now, the viruses that are in there, they admit there may be dozens of viruses that cause cancer.
Well, just 2 weeks ago, Doctor, it was in the news that millions of vaccines have this pig cancer virus in it. And I've read the government reports declassified in the 70s that over 100 million Americans were given the polio vaccine that had SV40, which gives people cancer.
Yeah, and they've proven that the really scary thing of this SV40 and the polio vaccine is that it's vertically transmitted. What
communicable.
That means is the virus goes through each generation. So your parents transmit it to you, you transmit it to your children on down the line. And they're seeing a lot of really terrible malignant diseases like mesothelioma and medulloblastoma, ependymomas, in which they're isolating this SV40 virus as the causative virus in these horrible malignancies in children today, showing that it's still being transmitted through generations because, as you said, they've estimated 100 million people contaminated.
Well, more than that, I saw an Indian study, and correct me if I'm wrong, this was years ago, but it was in the major Indian papers, that 100% of their municipal sewer systems were filled with SV40 from the vaccines, and not only is it intergenerational, passed on from parent to parent, from parents to children, their offspring, but that it is transmittable from person to person.
Yeah, and this is a big word because this is a major carcinogenic virus. And the government scientists have just bent over backwards to try to make the case that this is not a dangerous virus. Forever they denied it was even a carcinogenic virus until it was absolutely proven in an NIH lab. Since then they said, well, we'll do epidemiologic studies in the United States and see if there's any increased cancer since we've given the polio vaccine. And so they came out with a big denial, well, we didn't see any increased cancer rate. Well, the people that know about epidemiology studies said, well, the study was fixed, so it wouldn't show it. And so, now that they've actually typed the virus and from the tumors themselves, there's no denying it. It's not a contaminant. It is the causation of some of the worst malignancies of children we know of.
Well, Doctor, let me stop you again. Just from memory, 4 months ago, the AP reported that all over the world, UN polio vaccine is, quote, giving the children a, quote, weaponized super polio. But that was just in a few newspapers. And then we see, I've talked to other medical doctors. I want to ask you if this is true, but that 30, 40, 50 years ago, when they were in residency, finishing up their medical degree, that they would take them into the ward and show them a 10-year-old with cancer, and it was like finding a four-leaf clover or a leprechaun. It was so rare, and now everywhere I go, there's 5, 10-year-old kids just dying everywhere of cancers, and many times it's linked to formerly rare cancers that have been conclusively proven to be tied in with the SV40. So, A, can you speak to that? And then, B, come on, we know this isn't an accident. I mean, they're eugenicists. I mean, we have all these government documents where they want to reduce our numbers.
Well, it is true about the incidence of these cancers. And all of us older guys talk about that, how these cancers we're seeing now were so rare. You were lucky to see 1 or 2 cases in medical school and in your residency training. Now, we're just seeing them everywhere. Things like pancreatic cancer used to be extremely rare. Lymphomas was nowhere near the incidence that it is now. Now it is the #1 malignancy in 30-year-olds and rising all the time. So we're seeing a great number of diseases, and even things like asthma. Asthma has increased over 10-fold in the last couple of decades, and it's estimated that it's the vaccine program that's reducing it.
Why is it causing a heightened over autoimmune response?
Yes, an autoimmune response from the components in the vaccine. And we also know that type 1 diabetes, juvenile diabetes, is related to vaccines. This is a new study just came out, made a very strong case for it. Yet their attitude is, well, it's more important that we vaccinate everybody than we worry about a couple of 100,000 kids who are crippled every year and thousands who will die from complications of these vaccines. And you're talking about contaminating the whole population with these viruses that are contaminated. You can't get rid of the virus. These viruses are incorporated in your genetic structure. They're passed on to your children and grandchildren.
Let me stop you again, because there's so many points I want to cover with you. This is incredible. I'll have to do a part 2. You're so gracious to spend this time with us. Going back, and I just have the article up on screen, mainstream news reported, and this was going on in April and May and June of last year, that last year's seasonal flu and this year's seasonal flu, some of the major companies were putting an H1N1 simulant, and then I had medical doctors on that explained that viral simulant was really an attenuated virus, and so now that's why they're saying you take the seasonal flu, then you get H1N1, which is what 4 different studies out of Canada, and you mentioned one out of India, have shown. So please speak to that, but then overall, second question, is it the good news that we're having record numbers of people refuse vaccines because people are finally getting wise to this? Go ahead.
Well, it's true that they're manipulating manipulating these vaccines all the time, and they're not telling the public what they're doing. You know, they're putting viruses in, they're putting antigens in these vaccines, and no one's telling the public of what's being added to these vaccines. Now, your second observation, what's happening is secretly, since we've had this disaster with H1N1, we should have been the learning lesson. Right at that time, Merck Pharmaceutical was secretly going to the state legislature to get them to overturn exemption laws so that you couldn't refuse the vaccine because they were so upset that so many people had refused the vaccine in this season. And right here in my own state, I know of this action taking place. And in your state, you know, as Governor Perry was getting the Gardasil as a mandatory vaccine because he was getting money from Merck Pharmaceuticals. So our state politicians are people we need to keep an eye on because they're going to override exemptions to these vaccines and force people to do it. The other thing, this new health care bill that was passed, if anybody bothered to read it, inside it said all vaccines recommended by the CDC will be made available. Well, that doesn't just mean made available. It means you will take them, or you cannot get health care in the United States.
Well, we know they tried in New York and Massachusetts to force people to take it, so we know this is what they have in mind. And I want to get you back on about health care. There's so much that we could pick your brain about here, and we're running out of time. What about Gardasil? I mean, I remember 4 years ago in the trials, it was in the news that it was killing a large percentage, statistically, one of the most dangerous vaccines ever, this cancer virus. And then the insert admitted it didn't even protect you, but from a few strains, and there's thousands of these things. And then Rick Perry came out and said, you must take it, which was another hoax. He just put it on the list of recommended through the health department. And now they want to make boys take it. And people are dying all over, and they just don't give a damn.
Well, it's a worthless vaccine, and there's a new study out that shows that just increasing certain nutrients in your diet reduces cervical cancer by 85%. Well, that vaccine is nowhere near that effective. So if you truly wanted to prevent cervical cancer, in young girls, all you need to do is give them a couple of nutrient supplements. But, of course, they would never do that because there's no big profits for the vaccine.
Or not let them have sex with people.
Sure. I mean, you could do something really drastic, and that is reestablish a moral principle in which you're not having sex with everybody you meet in the shopping mall. But, you know, that's so drastic according to the collectivist left-wing viewpoint, we can't dare turn back the clock because that would just violate the laws of the universe according to their way of thinking. But, you know, we've got to reestablish the foundation of morality. We've got to reestablish these things and just tell the far left and the extreme social engineers we're no longer going to listen to their nonsense because everything they've engineered in the last 70 years is about disaster. I mean, the whole sex education thing was their idea. It was going to stop teenage pregnancies. It was going to stop the spread of venereal disease. Well, both have risen astronomically since their brilliant social engineering program.
Well, their brilliant eugenics plan. Absolutely, Doctor. We got to break again. Stay there. Amazing information with our guest, Dr. Russell Blaylock. We'll give you his website again and tell you about all the great materials he has there so you can educate yourself. We're honored to really have a great patriot who's really probably saved hundreds of thousands of people on the show with us. We have over 100 books written by top scientists, the White House science czar, John P. Holdren, the head of the UN, all of them. All they talk about is putting things in your food, water, and your vaccines to sterilize you and dumb you down. I know that sounds horrible and hard to believe, but I mean, here's the Times of London. It was also in ABC News. Billionaire club and bid to curb overpopulation. And it says America's richest people met in secret at Rockefeller University. And at the end it says for a world government to carry out population reduction. And I've got CNN here yesterday calling for a one-child policy. Listen, there's a reason China is at the heart of this New World Order, and they're making your shots, and it makes you have miscarriages and get cancer. I mean, this is a fact. Dr. Blaylock, getting down to that point, I mean, you're a medical doctor, brain surgeon, scientist, but we've talked before. You've been criticized by the media for your courage, but you're just reading. I mean, you've read the same documents I've read. I mean, am I joking around when I say the elite are saying they want to do this to us, and then 2 + 2 = 4? It's happening?
Well, there's been a great number of books written about population control, which if you're really interested, if you have any question about this, as you say, you can get on government websites, you can get on foundations. There's a number of powerful foundations that are supplying billions of dollars for this purpose, world population control. And if you read the literature, I mean, these are some of the most powerful people in the world. If you read their literature, they openly talk about how we've got to drastically reduce the population of the world, and how everybody that survives this population control are going to benefit enormously, because so much land will be available. It'll be easier to feed the population. There'll be less disease, on and on and on. They give all this justification. Well, there's a lot of people in powerful positions who believe this. I've had a number of my physician colleagues who agree with it. And the doctor's lounge will tell you, well, I think that the population needs to be drastically...
Let me interrupt you again. My dad, he's an oral surgeon and dentist. He has a lot of physician friends. And when he went to college, he said in the 60s, this was the majority view. And what these people don't understand is these physicians aren't elitist either. Their kids are taking this stuff. See, the average yuppie doctor, and I want to get your comment on this, they think they're immune for this. It's fine to, we're spiking those black people shots in Africa. What these immoral people, control freaks on power trips don't get is this is being done to everybody, isn't it?
Well, you're exactly right. And it's the delusion that somehow they're going to be in the group that's going to be spared. And when you look at it, the history of this collectivist movement, those are the people that are going to be included in the ones to be removed. I spoke on your program one time about Dr. Lilly. He wrote the Molecular Visions of Life, which was the history of molecular biology in America. Well, she is a very highly regarded historian of molecular science, and that's what the book's about. But she goes in great detail showing how the Rockefeller family had engineered with all of their friends, these multimillionaires, particularly through the foundation, a program to cause drastic reductions in human population. He was absolutely obsessed with it. Now, this is one of the wealthiest men in the entire world, owns tens of thousands of corporations, either directly or indirectly. It was one of the major forces that created the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission. Powerfully influential in Bilderberg.
Doc, one more segment. 1 minute break. We're coming back to you. Finish up with that point. Then let's talk about these eugenicists now having government death care over our lives, what this means. Dr. Russell Blaylock is our guest for another 5 minutes. We got a news blitz coming up and another guest in studio. He was finishing up with the government documents and reports he's read about how they want to use medical tyranny to carry out population reduction through the vaccines, through the food, through the water. We're going to have him back up in the near future. I was showing you the Times of London where they're talking about this. My film Endgame covers it. And now with government health care, Ron Paul has said this is a medical tyranny, and he's a medical doctor, a OB-GYN. We got about 4 minutes left. Dr. Blaylock, you've got the floor.
Well, what people need to understand, look at what happened during this fiasco with the vaccine. How there were lies packed on top of lies. All these people are damaged and ruined and dead from this operation by the government. And they want to take over the entire healthcare system. They're going to run everything that happens to you medically, and you trust them. We couldn't trust them with one event. So how are we going to trust them with taking care of millions of healthcare events that take place every day? I mean, it's ludicrous. It's terrifying. And I think, and as I told Alex, I think that we're in the end game here. These people think they're so close to winning, they're no longer hiding their agenda. When I was looking at this stuff 40 years ago, most of this you couldn't find in anywhere unless you really did some digging. Now openly talking about it. You have presidents of countries that are openly calling for new constitutions, world constitutions. You have people talking about dissolving the sovereignty of countries openly. They're no longer hiding this because they think they're so close to winning. They don't have to hide it any longer. You can find population reduction documents very easily off the Internet in which they openly talking about how we want to do this. You look at people like Rahm Emanuel's brother, who's a physician, and the Hastings Institute. They openly talk about killing off the old people in terms that say, well, we've got to evaluate whether your life is worth living. We no longer can just provide you with unlimited health care.
And under comparative care, Tom Daschle and all of them say that's the plan. And they sold raising taxes, cutting benefits, and having the government tell physician what to do. And it's so nightmarish, the average person just can't believe it.
And according to this bill, the physician will have no power whatsoever. He will be told everything he will or will not do. And if he doesn't do it, he'll lose his license or he'll go to jail. That's specifically outlined. And if people think that's not going to happen, they're deluding themselves. I've been warning physicians for over 30 years. They refused to listen all along, and here we are at the very end game. Everything I said was going to happen happened, but they were so hard-headed, so convinced that they could control it and stop it, and now that what I hear from my physician friends, they want to quit, retire, and get out of medicine. They're sick of it.
And now medicine will be carried out by government-trained kind of technicians, and they're openly saying somebody over 60 won't get a knee surgery, you'll get a shot of cortisone.
Or they'll give them a cane. People who have cataracts will just be given a stick with a red tip on it, and that's going to be your treatment. Now, if you think that's not true, you're deluding yourself. We see this in socialist countries all over the world. The idea is that you're not worth the expenditure. Everything's based on public expenditure. Well,
I've got UN video where they say that once that's the socialist collectivist system.
Well, you get on the Hastings Institute website, they'll tell you that. There's numerous papers written by Rahm Emanuel's brother in which he openly calls for that. So now we have a government in power who you can find their words directly on these websites and these foundations calling for that very thing. And, people need to wake up. There's not a lot of time left to stop this.
BlaylockWellnessCenter.com. Doctor, will you join us again in a month for a part 2 to go through the bill itself?
I'll be glad to.
That's now law. God bless you, sir, and God bless you for your courage. It's always buoying to talk to you. We're going to beat this thing together. Take care.
Thank you, Alex. God bless you.
Have a great weekend.